the top secret stuff you can actually understand. This is leaked by Snowden, who is, now they say Snowden's leaks on a scale from 1 to 10 have gotten up to 12. The NSA is very, very, very upset, as they ought to be. This is exactly what they try to prevent. And this kind of stuff, so here's the, this is a list of facts and how secret they are, how much you should never tell anybody about them. And there are some here that they were very, very, very concerned that nobody would ever find out. So for example, the fact that the NSA, this has been a rumor for years, that NSA will actually force companies that are making security software to put backdoors in, so they have secret copies of the data and to weaken it. But of course, what's funny is we know this happened. The previous, right now, the government recommended encryption standard is AES 128, but before that it was DES. And DES was supposed to be 128 bits. It was originally IBM's Lucifer, and that would have been unbreakable, so the NSA forced them to lower it to 56 bits, which was easy to crack. So we know they did this. They've already been completely exposed to this, but anyway, it is now considered highly secret. And here's the one that is most top secret that they didn't want anybody to know. Top secret at a minimum is that they make cryptographic modifications to commercial security systems to make them weaker so they're easier to hack into, which is, you know, the kind of thing you've heard about. But anyway, this is the kind of stuff they would like to keep secret, and now they can't. So it does get involved in Microsoft stuff. See, this is the problem with digital rights management. You have a company, you have a server, you have all these files that shouldn't just be all over the place, and then you have employees that are sending it to their Gmail and putting it on their iPad and putting it on their iPhone and making copies of it on their home drives and losing their laptops, and just all over the place copies of your secret stuff are just being lost. And what do you do about it? And Microsoft has an answer. It's not out yet, but it's coming in SkyDrive. They have a thing called Federated Identity Management. So your Active Directory login in Windows domain can propagate to all the systems you use, and then it can have a cryptographic key associated to that login, and all company documents are encrypted all the time. And you can only open them with the key that appears when you log into your Active Directory account. So when they fire you, or when they give your account no longer permissions to see that document, you can't open it. And even all the other copies of it you made, you can't open them either. That's what we need. That's what the whole world needs pretty much. Because this is not just the military. It's every company's got, you know, your credit card number and your password. Everybody's got stuff that just shouldn't be leaking all over the place. And right now, the only thing people do is try to prevent you from making unauthorized copies of it. But they're having to accept that's just impossible because everybody has some drive in their pocket, and you can't really stop people from making copies. Anyway, this and Bradley Manning. Bradley Manning was a similar issue. He went to work and just brought in a DVD and burned a DVD with all the secret stuff and sent it off to Julian Assange. All you need is one disgruntled employee in your company, and they copy everything and send it off and create a world of trouble. This one's kind of fun. I teach a lot of security classes, and this is the #1 problem in computer security, is that security experts, and the same thing applies, by the way, to technical experts, like tech support experts, like you folks might be becoming, they have terrible communication skills. They typically are focused on staying alone in their room with the computer, and they can't explain anything without bringing up a lot of technical terms that no one can understand, and they especially can't explain anything to their own managers. The managers are typically non-technical people who don't really want to hear about permissions and binary code and stuff. They want to hear, what do we need, how much will it cost, when will it be ready? And technical people usually find that frustrating. You don't want to think in those terms, but that is why you hire them. As a manager, you're trying to drive this ship, and you hire technical people to figure that stuff out and boil it down to actionable business intelligence. That really is your job. Anyway, so one of the many studies has shown this, that most people on the job know about security problems, and the management never finds out. You can certainly see this at Microsoft. I mean, it is pretty, when the iPhone came out and the iPod came out, all Microsoft employees bought them just like everybody else did because they were wonderful, and if you had them at work, you had to hide them because they would get really mad at you for not using the Zoom. Now, the Zoom was worthless, and Microsoft finally canceled it, but before then, you had to pretend to like it. And this is, you know, like a church, it's the denial of reality. This tends to happen when you get high in power, is the people below you lie to you, and the people below them lie to them, and they hide things from you, and the people with the most responsibility usually don't have the facts. And, you know, at least for stuff like Bush invading Iraq, he really thought they would be grateful because he just believed what people told him. Anyway, the rubber ducky is pretty cool. I had a student brought one of these to class. It's 40 bucks. This is a special USB drive, and what it does is when you plug it in a USB port, it tells the computer that it's a keyboard, and then it types in PowerShell commands. And so the one he had would copy all the files off your desktop. There's another one that will copy all the passwords off the machine. You just plug it in, and typing appears on the screen, and everything gets stolen off the machine. It goes onto another USB drive. And this is an attack that is almost impossible to defend against. I mean, there are USB keyboards, and there's just an electronic signal to identify them, so it's not obvious what you can do about this. There was a similar one called the USB pocket knife that I used in projects a couple of years ago, where we plug in something, and until Windows XP Service Pack 3, when you plugged in a USB drive, if there was an Autorun file on it, it would automatically run. And there was a thing called the U3 USB drive you would plug in, and your machine would have another yellow start button over here, and you could run programs right on the USB. And it was sold as a security device, so you're not leaving temporary files on the machine. You run everything on USB. But the program that launched that button had to run automatically when you plug it in, and you could just as well run malware automatically when you plug it in. And that's what the United States and Israel used to shut down the Iranian nuclear isotope separators. That was Stuxnet. It was an attack that used that Autorun feature. Among other things. There's something quite similar to it. And so the Microsoft finally turned that off in Windows XP Service Pack 3. So when you plug in a USB, it will automatically run files on it. But if it thinks it's a keyboard and it thinks it's typing, it has to listen to that. So it's a pretty clever attack. And it really works. Students got one and brought it in. Malicious hardware is a big issue. Anyway, this is something I've been playing with. I just learned about it at Pacific IT Pros. Oh yes, and that's one thing I really want to tell you folks. This is extra credit. You should do it. Packet Pros. If you don't know about them, you should check it out. This is San Francisco's Microsoft Office contributes space, and they buy pizza. I'm not sure if Microsoft pays for pizza, but they certainly give them the room. And these, every first Tuesday of every month, they have pizza and a technical meeting here. And there are like 150 people that go there all the time. They are all local tech support people. Most of them are Microsoft system administrators, or they're tech support people that maintain machines. And they often hire people there. They often ask questions, technical questions, and get answers. And it's extremely valuable professional networking. So I highly recommend going if you have a Tuesday night free. I teach a Tuesday night class, and I carefully arranged it to leave these days open so I can go there. It's a hit. You need to learn a little bit more about Microsoft. It's good, and most of the people that run it are all Microsoft insiders, MVPs, and they work for Microsoft under contract and such, and so you get the real Microsoft story, and you have to get kind of close to Microsoft to find out what's really going on. Because all the stuff they design is for huge corporations. If all you do is use like a Windows 7 machine on your desktop, you're only seeing like about 10% of what Microsoft does. Most of their real development is on the high-end server stuff, and these guys really will teach you about it. So if you go to that, let me know. I'll give you extra credit. It's true of other training events. If you find another valuable training event around here, I generally give extra credit for them, because there's lots of things happening around here that are just as good as one of my lectures or one of my homeworks. So at Packet Pros, I told you about jumbo frames. This is just a sign of how much I don't know. Apparently, the server guys have known about this stuff for years. If you send an Ethernet packet can only move 1,460 bytes of data or so. That's the official Ethernet standard. But on local area networks, if you use gigabit NICs, it would be a lot faster to send bigger packets, and they can do that. They call it jumbo frames. And the most common thing they do is 9,000 bytes. And they really do it on servers, and it makes it run 50% faster. And I tested it in the lab, and it's true. I'm going to write it up for my 106 students. You got two machines, drag a file from this one to that one, turn on the jumbo frames, and it goes faster because it's spending less time moving headers and negotiating back and forth, more data and less overhead. But you can't send those over the internet. They only on your local area network. Anyway, I thought it was interesting, and it only works with gigabit. So almost everything is gigabit now. All right, and as you can see, he's recording these lectures, and eventually they're going to be up on YouTube. So
the first one is. Well, I missed the first week, so it just starts with the second week.
Yeah, so send me a link, and I'll just put it on my webpage for the course, so people can find them. So there will be some recordings of the class available up there. We'll see how well it goes.
But if you Google Sam's class video in YouTube, that's where it is.
Okay, and just send me a link when it's up, and I'll put it on. But if you make a channel, that's even easier. Just put a link to the channel. Okay. But yeah, that's good. I'm all for that.
I think it is a channel. I'm not
Yeah, that's
sure.
good. Yeah, that's specific. They can't connect, put one link to the channel, they can see whatever's there. All right, anybody got any questions about anything? Yeah.
So when you're troubleshooting networks, going from one person, okay, why can I not connect from Windows 7 to Windows XP?
There are a lot of reasons. Now,
Windows remote assistance.
is it for remote assistance?
Windows assistance, Windows remote assistance, I think.
Yeah, remote assistance. Well, remote assistance is actually quite vigorous. See, file sharing is quite difficult. There's a lot of barriers for the way for that. Remote assistance, you should be able to do that if you can ping from one machine to the other. But there's a whole series of troubleshooting steps. Now, the Windows 7 side has a nice troubleshooter that will just do it. The Windows XP side does not.
Yeah.
You're trying to control XP from 7, right?
Yes.
Well, there must be something in the path. But remote assistance is really quite powerful. It'll even punch through network address translation. So, but it's got to be something in the path.
Okay.
So, I mean, the first thing is ping from one machine to the other. And the next thing I would do is check the addresses and see if you're passing through a layer of address translation or firewalls and such.
Is it a trace route?
What's that?
Is it a trace route?
Trace route might help. Trace route is about the same thing as ping.
Okay.
Nmap is quite helpful. Nmap will find what ports are open.
Yeah.
But these are the usual steps. God, I know I do it from the viewpoint of hacking into networks, but it amounts to the same thing. You test to see if there's any connection at all with ping. Then you use Nmap to see what ports you can go through, and then you should be able to find out. And the next step, by the way, which is extremely helpful, is to run Wireshark at both ends.
Okay.
This is how you really get to the bottom. Watch every packet that's sent and what's received, and see what's not getting through. So, have you used Wireshark?
Yeah.
Yeah.
120?
Yeah, Wireshark is awesome, and it's a big, complicated program, but the more you learn, the better. Then this is how you solve all problems like this. You're in Wireshark at both ends of any kind of connection that's not working, and then go to get machines where it does work and see what it should be.
Yeah.
Go here and see what didn't make it. And it can take a while, but you really get to the bottom of it that way.
Okay.
Yeah. But the first step is always ping and then turn off all the firewalls in between, for starters. That would give you a clue. Yeah. All right, good. Any other questions? All right, let's move on to the next chapter here, which is programs. So, let's see, I should be able to make this one big, shift that fire. Yeah, all right. So this is true, this program installation stuff is the same for every version of Windows 7, except for the Windows XP mode, which you only get with the professional versions. By the way, Windows XP mode is going to create a significant political problem for Microsoft very soon. Support for Windows XP ends in April of 2014, only about 6 months away. Then everyone has to quit using XP, so what about people using Windows 7 XP mode? Are they going to tell people to quit using that too? If they don't, then they're going to have to keep making security patches for it because their customers are still using it. Yeah?
When you're saying it's going to end, does that mean that everything has to change in every business?
Yes.
Automatically?
No. What it means is you can continue to use it, of course, but there'll be no more patches, not even security patches. And in practice, what this means, what happens usually is the day after it ends, somebody reveals a devastating exploit. So they can totally take over all the machines, because now they will never be patched. And so something like 35% of businesses are still using it, or something like that. And of course, they're just beginning to face up to the fact that it's actually not easy to move from XP to 7. You can't just take your existing hardware and upgrade from XP to 7, like we've been talking about. You have to go through a somewhat painful process. So that's more motivation to just keep using XP. And you can keep using it. You can still use Windows 98 if you want to. But if you're connected to the internet, any clown can just take you over. And that's going to be true of XP after April. And it's going to be true of XP mode after April too. So that's why I've heard people tell me, though, Microsoft must be lying. And they can't really stop making security patches, not until Windows 7 is over. Because Windows 7 includes Windows XP. So I don't know what they're going to do about that. And it'll be interesting to see how they dance around that. But corporate customers using Windows 7 are using Windows XP with Microsoft's blessing and a license, and they can reasonably demand patches. We will see what happens. Anyway, there used to be something in the control panel called add or remove programs, but nobody ever added programs that way anyway. It doesn't make any sense. It was just an imitation of something called add or remove hardware, which made a little bit more sense. The programs come with installers, which by the way are made by Microsoft. You just buy software, then you run it. It takes a snapshot of your system to install your stuff. It takes another snapshot, and then it creates an MSI file with their software. That's why all the installers look the same. They're all just made by software Microsoft gives you to make installers. The main thing you have to worry about is installing programs that were not specifically written for Windows 7. And the big issues there are user account control and compatibility. User account control is the main one. If the installer isn't the kind of installer that Microsoft expected, then it won't automatically elevate itself to administrator. And you'll have to right-click and run as administrator to install the software correctly. That's the main thing. User account control is this box that pops up asking for permission. One way to work around it, of course, is to turn off user account control in the control panel, and then you're always administrator like you are in XP. That is a really dangerous thing to do. That makes you susceptible to a whole lot of old-fashioned attacks for no good reason. It's better to leave it turned on and learn how to cope with it, especially in Windows 7 where it's not that bad. There are some compatibility features here. Microsoft will warn you if one of their programs has no compatibility issues, and they even try to find solutions. This usually only really works for Microsoft products, otherwise they'll say they don't know any solutions. But it will warn you when there may be a compatibility problem, and you can make a shortcut to the installer, and you can run it in what's called compatibility mode on the Properties tab. And what that will do is it will lie to the program and tell it, I'm really Windows XP. And that will often make it work. Because remember, there are some compatibility features like junctions we'll talk about later. There are quite a lot of tricks, there are quite a lot of things in Windows XP to make it look, in Windows 7, to make it look like Windows XP. So Windows XP installers will usually work, especially if you run them in compatibility mode. And so there's even a compatibility troubleshooter you can run that will automatically try to guess the right compatibility mode to run the installers on. And here's that compatibility mode. On a shortcut, you can go here and you can tell it, pretend to be XP, pretend to be Vista, pretend to be whatever it wants to be, and automatically connect the folders, the XP folders to the corresponding folder in Windows 7, and that usually works. The only time it of course will work better the more professional the program is. If it's a Microsoft program, you're fine. If it's made by a big corporation, they will actually meet all the Microsoft standards. If it's some third-party thing that somebody put on a floppy disk in China, really originally wrote it for 98, then you're going to have trouble. So XP mode is in here in order to help corporate managers use Windows 7. When people upgraded to Windows 7, a lot of people were very nervous because they're afraid their XP software wouldn't run anymore. And Microsoft made a lot of effort towards making them compatible. So Windows XP software does run in Windows 7, but in case it doesn't, you get a free copy of Windows XP that runs in a virtual machine on top of the 7. So if you have something that won't run on Windows 7 for whatever reason, the most common reason being your own staff wrote it, so it doesn't really have a proper installer or anything, you can just put it in a virtual Windows XP and run that on top of Windows 7, and that'll work. And that was just Microsoft's answer to try to remove anybody's excuse for not moving to Windows 7. Now, originally, XP mode required you to have hardware virtualization, which almost any modern motherboard has, but if your equipment is older than maybe 5 years, you might not have that option. But that has been relaxed now. There is a patch available to run Windows XP mode on machines without hardware-assisted virtualization anymore. There's a tool here to detect it, whether you have it, but yeah, here it is. This came out about a year ago. There's now a way to run XP mode even on machines without hardware-assisted virtualization. You can run a virtual machine on anything. Just how many people have used virtual machines? Not everybody, most everybody. All right. Anyway, you go on and go use them as classes go forward here. It's a simulated computer on your computer. What it simulates is hardware. The VMware software pretends to be a hard drive and a network card and a processor and some RAM, and then you put an operating system on it from the disk like you would put it on a real machine. And this solves an enormous number of problems. And in particular, lets you run multiple operating systems at the same time. Of course, it won't run as fast as it would if it was installed on what they call the bare metal directly, but it will solve all compatibility problems. If your hard drive is not compatible with Windows 7, with Windows XP, you can just run a virtual XP, but will simulate a hard drive that is. And the simulated hardware is always the same, and it's very standard generic stuff, so you won't have any driver problems. Yeah?
Have you talked to very many people that have used XP mode in a corporate environment?
No.
Because I've tried it, and I find it a little weird because you, if you install the XP mode in the virtual PC in Windows, in an administrator logon, and you have to have a logon for the XP mode, and even though you're not really supposed to see it run once you've installed the program, then all sorts of funny things happen when the person logs in, where
Well, that's
it asks for a login, and then I think the virtual machine goes to sleep, or doesn't necessarily by default shut down. So then the next time you've got to wake it up, and then.
Well, I'm glad to hear this,
So
because almost nobody actually used it.
I'd be interested if anyone's gotten it working more smoothly, but I've struggled with it.
Well, I'm glad to hear. Anybody else used it? Really?
What is it?
XP mode?
I used to have one, but so now for this class, so more better to install the virtual machine. So you will need a code
What's that?
for like in order to install the virtual machine.
Yeah.
So you will
No,
have
no, you don't have to, not in this class.
no,
If that's what you're asking. No, we're not going to use it. We could, but it's actually not that used in the real world. Very few people actually use it. What most people found is their old software would run okay on Windows 7, so they didn't need it. And by the way, if you want, of course, a more professional product, you pay for VMware and run it in Fusion mode, and that's what this attempts to imitate. Are there any other questions? Yeah.
For Windows 7, is document settings just a pointer?
Is what?
Is document settings just a pointer in the directory?
Document settings?
Yeah, documents and settings,
Documents and
the
settings.
directory.
Oh, I'm not sure. Your control panel, you mean?
Yeah, no, on the file manager. When I press on the document settings, it's not really a directory. Okay.
Well, let's bring it up. We're going to be talking about profiles pretty soon. Let me see. So if you go here, you're talking about, documents and settings here. Yes, I'm glad you brought it up. We're going to talk about that. That is a junction. Now you can't open it, and there's a bunch of others in here. There is no documents and settings in Windows 7. It's users. That's where the XP profiles were. And that's there so you can install XP software.
So
when XP software tries to use, installers try to use it, installers are allowed to open this, but you aren't.
So if you upgrade to Windows 7 from XP, it will take XP directory, but document settings and
No, you cannot upgrade from Windows XP to Windows 7. The only purpose of this is for installers. If you have software that was written for Windows XP, it's going to try to find a documents and settings folder. There isn't any such thing in Windows 7, so they put this thing here, which is a junction, which will allow it, it'll redirect down here to users. And there's a bunch of them. So every folder that has changed names between 7 and XP has a junction replacing it here, which installers will find, which will redirect them to where they put stuff. So they can think they put something in documents and settings, but they really put it where Windows 7 wants it. And we'll talk about those a little more later. Those junctions are one of the more confusing compatibility features in Windows 7. But they're pretty important. So if you run 64-bit Windows 7, I had a student ask me, should I run 64 or 32? And they're both fine in their own way, but there are differences. One thing to know is that you cannot run a generation of processor. If you have a 64-bit machine, you can run 32-bit code, but you can't run 16-bit code. There's not too much 16-bit code around. The actual MS-DOS command prompt, not CMD, but command.com, is 16 bits. And you won't be able to run that on 64-bit. You won't be able to run the really old 16-bit help program for the really old help files for old software and such, but there's not much around that you run this way. But the other thing that really gets people is when you install 32-bit software on a 64-bit machine, it doesn't go into the program files folder. It goes into a special folder called program files x86, and that confuses people that go looking for stuff. Anyway, that's the main, in general, you can run 32-bit software just fine on a 64-bit operating system. The main thing that gets you is device drivers. The device drivers for your hardware might not exist in 64-bit mode, and your device drivers might not be signed, and 64-bit will refuse to use them if they're not signed. So if you have cheap old hardware, or cheap printers, or cheap network cards or anything, you might be better off with a 32-bit version. So the startup folder is the easiest way to make things launch automatically. It's been around forever. It's getting pretty hard to find. I do this quite a bit. I put startup messages on machines. Like if I go in the lab and I find something wrong and I have to delete a bunch of stuff, I like to put a startup message that'll pop up to warn the student when they come back why I had to delete their stuff. And back in old XP, you could right-click and explore the start button to find this, but that's over now. Now you have to hunt for it. And it's pretty hidden. Go to C, look for startup. This is where stuff is that will launch automatically when you start. And this is the new appearance of Rover the Search Dog. XP had a little dog character that would try to entertain you while you wait. But it still takes about 5 minutes for Microsoft to search your hard drive, which remains a great humiliation to them because Google Drive can do it in under 1 second. Now it's beginning to find startup things, but it still didn't find the startup folder. This is one I have been unable to memorize. I have to do this every time. It's a long path. If you want to make something automatically start, I might get so bored I'll let this go in the background. I think that's what we're going to do. We'll go ahead a bit and come back to this. That will eventually find the startup folder. This is one of the many sort of embarrassing things about Windows. I'm looking for a commonly desired system file, and Windows can't even find it. If you go to the command line and use dir, it will find it faster. But anyway, all right. So there are a lot of other ways. The startup folder is the most friendly, polite way to make something automatically start when you log in. But if you're nastier, or if you want something to start not when you log in, but when the machine powers on, because it should happen even if no one logs in, then you can use these other keys, and there are a lot of ways. These are called auto start extension building points, and there's too many of them. Registry keys, you have run keys that will run once. There's things that will load values. There's win logon and boot execute registry keys. This is what malware does to make it come back. You can have scheduled tasks. You can schedule things to run even before you log in now. Win.ini is an old file from MS-DOS, and I read in your book that there was some way to automatically start things from Win.ini. I've never been able to make that work, not in Windows XP or Windows 7. If somebody figures out how, I'm interested. But you can also do all these other things like log on scripts. And so then you have a new problem. Yeah?
The startup file is under all programs.
No. Yeah, but it's a lot further down than that. Let's see. All right, let's see. Now here is the one. You have to use C, users, S found, app data, Roman, Microsoft, Windows, start menu, program, startup. That's where you have to put something to launch when you start the machine. There's another one here. Yeah, so here they are.
But if you go where he said and you right click and you go to properties, you can get the path because it's a shortcut.
Oh, good. Yeah, so this is the one I'm always having to go to. C, users, S found, app data, Roman, Microsoft,
Exactly.
Windows.
Yeah,
There's a faster
But you
way?
can get it more quickly by right clicking, going to all programs, startup,
Good. Oh, there's startup here?
yeah.
somewhere in there, yeah.
It's towards the
Cool.
bottom.
And then if you want the actual
Oh,
path, you
and
right
that's
click
it?
and go to properties.
Yeah.
Ooh. Hey, thank you. I did not know that. That's good. All right. I think I might have known it when I first wrote this slide years ago, but I forgot. I got to remember that because I do this every time. I feel stupid. Good. Anyway, all right. So now the question is, if you have a bunch of things starting up automatically in your machine, like malware and display drivers and such, how do you get rid of them? MSCONFIG gives you a very limited option. This is the place a lot of people use to control it, but it is not recommended. MSCONFIG's been around for a long time. Config. Yes, okay. You have a boot item here, and you have a services and startup item, and here you can turn off some things, but it's not recommended to turn them off this way because this is supposed to be used only for diagnostic purposes. What they say is turn it off this way to see if it's the problem, and if you don't like it, then uninstall it. Anyway, this is one way to control it, but one nasty thing about it is this will not get everything that's starting up. But this is the kind of thing you get a lot on machines, all this junk trying to start up, and you can see why the machine starts getting slow. There used to be a program that would find all the startup items that really worked in Windows Vista. There was a thing, it's called Software Explorer, had a software startup programs tab, and this would really find all the programs that are automatically starting, and they took it out of Windows 7, and there's no replacement that I'm aware of. There might be some sysinternals tool that will do it, but it is kind of a problem. There is no way I know in Windows 7 to get a really authoritative list of everything that's going to start automatically. Anyway, you can also control it with group policy in GPEdit. If you have a Pro or better version of Windows, it's got group policy, and there are more policies here that will launch things. These are other ways to start things. Again, not a way to find everything that's going to start, but it's another way to automatically launch things. And that's group policy, which you use a lot on Windows domains. It's not that commonly used on workgroup machines. And it's got this long series of settings, and I think you play with it a little bit in the projects. You turn off some stuff in the control panel. Yeah.
I've been wondering about that too, because it's very useful to know what all the running programs are. The book says...
Well, you can see what's running in Task
Yeah.
Manager. And
not running. I mean, running
but
at
to see what
startup.
automatically starts. Yeah, that's right.
The book the book says that what the shortcoming of MSCONFIG is it doesn't list items included in group policy or Windows 7 task scheduler. So it would even be helpful enough for me if it's true that it's those three places you have to look. But I don't know if
That would
that's
be
even
yeah,
comprehensive.
That's a good question. If it's possible, just looking at those three places would be enough, I don't know. But there ought to be a tool, even a command line tool, that will give it to you. And I would imagine third-party tools like antivirus might get it. Like anti-spyware tools might have it. Anybody know a good one?
Oh, there's Autoruns. I don't know if that gives
Autoruns,
you
yeah.
everything.
Yeah, Autorun is assist internals, right?
Right.
Yeah, that would be a good place to start. This Mark Rusinovich is really hot. His tools are excellent. So here's Task Manager, of course, and the key press for this is Shift Control Escape. It's a good thing to learn, especially in these days of Windows 7 when most of our old mouse controls have been removed. Anyway, this gives you the status of all the things that are currently running on this machine. Now, if I go here, I just see the same things that are highlighted in the bar down here. These are the main applications that have been launched by me, the user mode applications I've run. Here's all the processes that are running, and those aren't all of them. Those are just the processes launched by me. If I use all users, then it'll show me all 62 processes, and that is normal. Microsoft Windows is running 62 processes. All right, anyway, you can also see all the services that are available on the machine, whether they're started or not. These are background processes that help other processes do things, like connect to the network card of the printer. You see the status of the machine, how much memory and RAM is being used right now, how much network traffic there is, and what other users are running things on your machine. If someone hacks into your machine and they take over and have a hostile shell, you can sometimes see it here as an extra process running you don't know about, like an extra copy of Notepad or CMD, but that's only if they're amateurs. What they do, if they're professionals, is they add the software that used to control your machine to this process, Explore. And I think I can zoom in, right? Nope, zoom in is not working. Control 2? Shift Control 2, what's it? Yeah, anyway. There's a thing called zoom in, but I can't remember what the keyboard shortcut word is. F2. All right, anyway. Explorer.exe is the process that draws your desktop. It draws the start menu, and that is where you can't turn this process off until you log out. So that's where a lot of remote control clients hide. They add themselves to Explorer.exe, and then you won't know that they're there. Anyway, so we talked about this application, show what's running, processes, show information about processes, and you can terminate processes in Task Manager. This is a somewhat risky thing to do. What don't I need? PowerPoint, maybe I'm using that. Here's Zoom It, for example. I can kill Zoom It. I can't figure out how to use it anyway. Right click, end process. There's this Assist Internals tool, it'll magnify the screen, and there is some key press. Now, I can end that process. It's going to warn me, do you want to end it? This may cause your machine to crash, but it doesn't because that's not a very important process. There are ones, especially if you show all processes, that will kill your machine. Give the blue screen of death or freeze the keyboard and so on. You can right-click anything and run it as administrator. If you have it pinned to the taskbar, you can right-click once and then right-click on this little thing and run as administrator. That's how you elevate privileges if you want to do it. You can also launch it from an administrator command prompt. Now, if I open this command prompt, that's going to be an administrator command prompt. Let's see what this one is. That's the non-administrator command prompt. So this one here doesn't say administrator in the corner. And, you know, I'm getting kind of annoyed by these little fun. Let me see what I can do. We turn on Zoom It and find out what it's Control 1. Good. So let's see if I can get it to work. Control 1. There we go. That's what I want to show you. So it says Windows Command Processor up in the corner. But if you click on this one, it's going to be going through a user account control box, and then it shows administrator in the corner. Control 1. Good. All right. So the administrator command prompt is the one that gives you administrator privileges, and this one doesn't. And you can run things without having to right-click and run as administrator if you use the command line. That's one way to get around it. These are ways to live with user account control. You can also use Shift Control Enter when you launch a program like Notepad. Shift Control Enter should launch it as administrator. In the lab up there, this tends to fail. I think it has something to do with keyboard drivers. But this Notepad is now running as administrator. And you might not be able to tell that easily, but you should be able to see it in Task Manager. No, I guess not. Okay. Anyway, so that's how you run things as an administrator if you want to, which gets people plenty confused compared to XP. You've logged in and yet your privileges are not always the same. All right, so you can uninstall programs in Control Panel just like you've done in previous Windows versions. And programs frequently fail to uninstall. This is a general feature of the Microsoft Windows installer and uninstaller. It has a bug that somehow they never seem to get to the bottom of it. And it frequently, when you uninstall software, it leaves a bunch of junk behind, especially in a registry. People say this is why Windows self-destructs. It certainly does. As you use it, it gets slower and buggier. That's why it's a good idea to just reinstall Windows every year or so to get it running right, or take images and roll back. But there is a Microsoft process you can get here of how to remove registry keys manually, how to search through the registry to remove them, and I got a lot of practice doing this when we used to be an authorized testing center for certification exams. The Pearson VUE software is terrible stuff, and it has a lot of problems that mess up students' tests, and every time they change it, you have to do this manual uninstallation before putting on the next version, so I had to do it a lot when we were a testing center, which we aren't anymore, because it turned out to be impossible without more help from the college. Anyway, so Microsoft Windows started this feature of having a file name extension and tying it to a program, and they had the idea that users don't care about programs. Users care about documents. I want to see my letter. I don't really care about Word. So they wanted you to be able to double-click on the document and have it automatically launch the program that's appropriate for that document. So they created this association between three-letter file extensions and programs. And that's it's at the heart of Windows, and leads to a lot of entertaining things. And one of the many things it led to was a lawsuit. There was a huge antitrust lawsuit against Microsoft over Windows 98. And one of the issues in there was that you're going to put the Microsoft version of a browser and email client and media player and everything on there, and nobody will ever use anything else. And so as part of the lawsuit settlement, which they barely managed to prevent Microsoft from being split into two companies, Office and Windows by the government, they agreed to make it easy for you to use non-Microsoft software. So they put in this option where you can just choose other programs. And at least in Windows XP, Service Pack 1, there was a special option here just to click non-Microsoft. You have non-Microsoft defaults on everything, in case you really hate Microsoft. But you still want to use Windows. Kind of weird thing to do. Anyway, you can control default programs here, and you can change them here. You can get the long list of them all in set associations. This will list all the extensions and what they go to. And the main thing people notice about this is your default browser, when you click the open web page links, and your default media player used to be a big one, and your default graphics. If you have JPEGs and then you put on some paint program or something, third-party thing like Photoshop, it'll grab the defaults. Right. So one thing you often have to do is you want to open something with a different program. So what you do, let's find a Word document or something. I can probably find one in my documents. All right. Let's go in here. Here's a PowerPoint file. That'll do. So here's a PowerPoint file. If I right-click it and open with, it will then, the recommended program is this. The other programs box starts out empty. You have to hit this. Then it will show you your other programs. So I could try to open that in Notepad, for example. Now, this is kind of evil. By default, it will permanently set all my PowerPoint files to open in Notepad from now on. And you choose that before you open it to see what it looks like. So that's kind of rude. So I'm going to uncheck that box and open it to discover that it probably looks like dirt, if it'll even open at all. I probably don't really want to leave the machine set this way. The next teacher will not love me when they try to teach a class in here and open a PowerPoint file and it looks like that. One of those nasty things you can do. That's what binary files look like when you open them in Notepad. It's kind of fun. You can sometimes find readable strings in here somewhere. But yeah, there they are. Some of it you can read. These you see the raw binary and the code. Some sections of it contain variables you can read, which is kind of fun. But anyway, I don't want to do that all the time. So since I didn't make it the default is still PowerPoint.
But now that you've done that,
Yeah.
I learned something new. The book said that now I think Notepad will always be a recommended program for you
Oh,
when
neat.
you go
Let's try
to
that.
when you go to PowerPoint.
It's now recommended, neat, even though it
I
didn't work.
think so.
Oh yeah, isn't that fun? Oh boy.
And then you have to go to remove it,
And that's in registry or
especially.
something, right?
So that can be dangerous if
Yeah.
somebody doesn't know what they're doing.
Well, I think in the project side, they know you learn how to do this in the registry, which is the real hardcore way to do it. Right, so you can set program access or defaults. Oh, there it is. I knew it was in here someplace because it was in there by court order. You must have this option to use non-Microsoft software in case you hate Microsoft. They put that in because they were forced to by U.S. antitrust court. Anyway, so Telnet, for example, is gone in Windows. This is pretty irritating to many people who run network services. You can't use the command line anymore. You have to go install it by turning Windows features on or off. You have to turn on the Telnet client if you want to use it. And I mentioned already when talking about that USB device, Autorun is now disabled on USB flash drives. It was the default in Windows XP until Service Pack 3 that if you plug in a USB, it will automatically run, the Autorun. And they took that out because that was way too dangerous. Boy, it was fun to hack machines with that. And one common way to take over companies was to just drop USB keys on the ground outside where people smoke. And they will pick it up and take it in and plug it in and automatically does whatever you want it to do. Now at least you have to double click on it and double click on the programs to run them. You have some chance for your antivirus to scan them and for you to notice that this doesn't look good. Anyway, so I got a few iClickers. If you don't have one, come and grab one. Just leave your name behind. I've got some scraps of paper up there you can write your name on. If you don't have an expendable ID card, don't use a driver's license or anything. You both have the numbers too. Might take it. That does happen. So I keep credit cards in here like everything. That's good. One here. Control one. I can follow you for that. So, if you start Internet Explorer on 64-bit Windows, what version of IE starts? I think I forgot to mention this, but it'll come up now. But it's 35 here.
Sorry, I didn't even realize you were starting.
Yeah.
You have another minute.
What version of IE launches by default? 64-bit. Wait, 50? All right. And I don't think I remembered to say this in the lecture, but it is 32-bit. It does not launch 64-bit IE. And that is another clue, by the way, that 64-bit software is often really not ready for prime time. But it actually runs the 32-bit version of IE on 64-bit Windows. And let me go back. That was back here in one of the slides. I somehow skipped over it. There we are. Yeah. Install 32-bit runs. Both versions go on, 32 and 64, but it launches the 32-bit one in the hopes that it will be more compatible with websites. Because a lot of websites are written long ago, of course. All right, so what versions have XP mode? Guess I'll put it in 30. All right, that's professional and higher. Most popular answer is correct. You've got to have a business version. They didn't give you that for the home versions. They figure you probably don't have the same issue with legacy software at home. All right, which one of these will give you a complete list of your startup programs? quit at 30. All right, and unfortunately not all. There is no tool that will give you complete list of your startup programs. Boy, that would be nice. There was in Vista, but not in Windows 7.
Why did it happen?
That's a good question, but asking why Microsoft does things is one of those things that will sort of make you cry. Even inside Microsoft, nobody knows why they do a lot of what they do. They're divided among themselves into like warring camps. And if you read Dilbert, that's very much Microsoft. Frequently, the reason they do things is to make the other team look bad or something. So, looking at it from you, like, why did they do Windows 8 at all? A lot of people are asking that question. So, all right. So, what can you use to see all running processes? Another good one is, why are they putting the CEO of Nokia in charge of Microsoft?
Yeah, I
He
know.
killed his own company. This is like when you murder your airline, you go bankrupt and give you $100 million bonus and you get a good manager. Anyway, they do a lot of things that make no sense at Microsoft. And yet occasionally make a good product like Windows 7 and they sail along. So all your running processes are in fact in Task Manager, that's correct. And one more of these, what's disabled for USB devices now? Put it 30 here. And it is Autorun that's disabled. Autoplay is still there, but Autorun is disabled. Autoplay is if you have a media file, it will play the music on it, like a CD, and that's not considered too dangerous because it just launches a media player. Autorun could do anything, and that turned out to be a pretty bad idea.
Is it disabled? I can't remember if it said this in the book. Does it look for a certain file on it? Is that what it does?
That's what it does.
Yeah.
And you'll see it on CDs also. It's called autorun.inf. And then it goes to, I think, autorun.exe, something
So
like that.
if the flash drive doesn't have that, then it will still pop up because it's just a blank Explorer window.
Yeah,
or
that's
something,
right. Yeah.
Okay.
And nowadays, that's all the behavior you'll see, unless you have old unpatched XP machines, or unless you change it. You can turn it back on in Control Panel, but it's not on by default. Anyway, it's a little bit earlier than usual. We're in between chapters. Let's take a 10-minute break. It's 9:46. We'll pick up at 9:55.